Join us September 25th, 26th, and 27th for a 3-day special streaming event, Strange Realities, to push the limits of your reality. Featuring authors, academics, researchers, occultists, experiencers, podcasters, and practitioners. All presenting fresh cutting-edge material and research. Streaming live. Featuring presentations by
Brent Rains,
editor of Alternate Perceptions magazine.
Aaron Goulias,
host of the Saucer Life podcast.
David Metcalfe,
writer and researcher.
Alan Greenfield,
author of Secret Cipher of the UFOs.
Stephanie Quick,
writer and blogger.
Red Pill Junkie,
14 researcher and explorer.
Tim Banal,
host of Banal of America.
Guy Malone,
iconoclast and troublemaker.
Timothy Ritter,
host of Strange Familiars.
Kiki Dombrowski,
author and practitioner.
Greg Bishop,
author of Project Beta.
Jenny Ashford,
host of 13 O'Clock.
Recluse,
host of The Farm.
Jack Montgomery,
Folk Magic.
Joshua Cutchin,
author of Thieves in the Night.
Reverend Michael Carter,
Alien Contact Experiencer.
Dr. Future,
host of Future Quake.
Tony Kail,
author of Memphis Hoodoo.
Rin Collier,
occultist.
Soraya Askath,
host of Where Did the Road Go? And John Tinney, Ghost Stalkers in Hell.
All 3 days, only $20. Tickets and info available at strangerealitiesconference.com. Brought to you by the Conspirinormal podcast. Conspirinormal.com. Strange Realities.
Okay, we're live. And welcome, guys, to yet another edition of the Strange Realities Conference preview episodes. We've got... we're on the Conspirinormal show Facebook, and we're on YouTube. So yeah, we are here with Reverend Michael J.S. Carter. Reverend Carter, how you doing? How you doing today?
Good to see y'all. I'm glad people are staying healthy.
Yes, sir.
Gotta stay healthy.
Yes, and that's kind of
healthy. I mean, if you can, you gotta keep that immune system high.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what we're trying to do with this conference, is keep everybody healthy and not everybody beaten in the same place like we used to.
Yeah.
So Reverend Carter, we're happy to have you at the Strange Realities Conference.
Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really great to have you with us. You were on Conspirinormal a long time ago.
Yep.
It feels like ancient times now.
I remember. Back in the day, as the young folks say.
That was like 2014, I think, or maybe 2015 might have been the last time I had you on. And I was kind of hoping that we would have you on with Guy Malone, because you guys have got a couple of interesting kind of contrasting different kind of subjects for this conference, because you're going to be talking about UFOs in the Bible, and Guy is going to be talking about aliens or demons, and here's why. That's the title of his conference. So his presentation. So we're going to be talking to him a little bit later on. But Reverend Carter, I kind of want to get a gist of what you're going to be talking about at the Strange Realities Conference coming up here at the end at the last weekend of this month.
Yeah, the last week. Well, I'm going to be talking about, and when I first started talking about UFOs in the Bible, very few people were talking about it at all. Even more conservative brothers and sisters. Now, that had been my experience, and then as time evolves and as people do, and then more conservative brothers and sisters were talking about ETs or off-world intelligences, but they did say that they were demons. For me, it was a double-edged sword, because at least people were now talking about it, right? It's one thing to say they don't exist at all, and that it's a desert and a sea between saying they do exist. I will say this: I do not personally believe that every extraterrestrial that people say they visit or whatever are angels, in the sense of that that everybody means you well, right? Just like there are different people who are more benevolent and malevolent. I would agree with that. I'm not like Brother Stephen Greer, who, for instance, will say that they're all sweetness and light. I can say that the ones that I have had interaction with, and I can't say they've all been sweetness and light because I don't know. I just know what happened with me. Do you see what I'm saying? I think that there's life in the universe, abundant life, but I can't say that all of them want to be my best friend.
Right.
I can't say that. I wouldn't say that about another human being.
Mm-hmm.
But I do think that we need to be talking about this, which we are. Now the government is, they're not coming out and saying that off-world intelligences exist, but they are coming around to, like, we've been tracking them. We don't know. I believe they do more than they're letting on. But I think now the conversation is open. 20 years ago, I couldn't talk about this without my church saying, you need to find another job.
Yeah,
so
and
we've come a long way.
Right.
That kind of brings me to an interesting point. I should have set this up though a little bit. Like, so you kind of have an interesting background with all this because you are an alien contact experiencer, which is a term that I much more go by than like alien abduction. I think that alien contact is much more appropriate. I think it's a more appropriate term. But you are also a reverend, as we described. But you're a Unitarian Universalist minister.
Yeah,
so,
I grew up in the Baptist tradition.
Yes, you did. Yeah,
I grew up in the Baptist tradition. Yeah. And see, I thought I was crazy. I had to go to a mental health professional when these things were happening because I had no reference for them, Brother Sergio and Adam, because I did not believe in them. I was raised in the Baptist tradition, man. And I when I say drink the Kool-Aid, I don't mean, and I don't want to use that in a negative sense, because there's still something about that tradition that I cling to. Because you never forget the bridge that brought you over.
Sure.
You never. And so, even though maybe never is not the best word, but I didn't believe it, but it served me well because some of the things that had happened, I didn't want people to say, "Oh, come on, man, you saw that on TV, or you saw a movie." I did not believe in it. And I remember when I was growing up in Baltimore, I forget the context, but someone asked me, "You don't believe in you?" They were shocked. And I was a kid. And I said, "No." And they said, "Why?" And I said, "No, the Bible is not in the Bible." You see, I try to keep my feet on the ground and in the sky in the sense of staying grounded. People talk about the fifth dimension, the third dimension, and I don't know what really that means. I do know that there are other beings that I've come in contact with, but I'm here on the earth, and like what Brother Sergio and I were talking about, how do we help our fellow human beings? We were talking about people being out of work and that kind of thing, and you got to keep, Henry David Thoreau said, it's okay to build sandcastles in the sky, but you have to put a foundation under them. And so I talk about this stuff, and it has happened, and it probably will continue to happen. And at the same time, when we hang up, I got to go get some groceries. I got to pay my rent needs to be paid. You kind of walking, and you got to integrate both these worlds. That's how I come at it. I can say I've seen these beings, and we'll talk about that. But's not a good word. And I still got to get up in the morning and brush my teeth and pay my rent. And now everybody's seeing them. And so what becomes more important to me is, yes, I've seen star people. Yes. But I still I'm still trying to figure out, how do I get along with my fellow human beings? How do I deal with my fear? How do I deal with race issues? How do I deal with money issues? How do I raise my child? This is real life we're talking here.
Yes.
So you got to be able to integrate it. How do I love my freaking neighbor? And this is, I think, what they want too. We can't even get along with one another. So what are we going to do when we meet these people face to face as a group? We'll probably shoot first and ask questions later. So we got racial stuff. We got the climate change. Brother Sergio and I were talking about, the media is keeping us distant from each other. You can't blame everything on them. We make choices. So even though I've had these experiences, I want to know how to love. I want to know how to keep my heart open. And I think that when I talk about this stuff in the context of UFOs, if you remember in Nashville, I got a standing ovation. I've never gotten a standing ovation. And that's not why I do it. But you know why people loved it? Because I talked about the Bible and UFOs, but then I started talking about how we grow spiritually and how we got to come together, man, because whether they're UFOs or not, we're going to kill each other. And that's what people, I feel, are struggling with. I love that you've seen UFOs, and this is great information, but I need some wisdom too. How do I get along with the person who doesn't like me because of the way I look, or because I'm a conservative and you're not? And that's where the rubber hits the road. And I think with the UFO, at least from my context, a lot of the beings, they want us to be able to learn how to do that. How do I get along with my brothers and sisters? I'm not saying they all want that. I'm just saying that that's what I got when people don't agree with me. Brother Malone, we can agree to disagree, but I don't have to shake my fist and go, well, you just don't get it. Or you're in a red state and I'm in the green state and you're a mess and I'm not. And nobody wants to hear that.
Yeah,
nobody wants to hear that.
I think that was like from the early days of Conspirinormal. That was probably one of my favorite episodes when I had both of you guys on and to kind of compare notes about your experiences and how each one of you felt differently about it, but yet you guys kind of had a similar kind of root and a similar kind of belief system going into all of it. And that was probably one of my most favorite episodes. But you are right. I mean, like, we got to deal with all these practical things day in and day out. And we've got, especially right now, we've got so much turmoil going on in the world. And it's almost just like we have to have some kind of balance. And we may be dealing with dealing with good and bad forces on another realm as well. So
because there are negative forces. I'm not Mary Poppins here.
Right.
It's just when I was in New York, and remember Bud when Bud Hopkins was alive, and Bud and I got along famously. He regressed me at one point. He was very good too.
Did you know Peter Robbins?
We've never met. I've read his book, and we text each other on Facebook.
Yeah, he was big in with Bud Hopkins. He was pretty much like his research assistant for a very long time.
And Bud and I disagreed. Bud thought that they were all bad, and the way I interpreted it, and I said no, that hasn't been my experience, and we still got along. It wasn't, we're human beings, and the thing is that everybody sees things the way they are. We don't see things as they are. That we see things the way we are. I know people who have had terrible, frightening, traumatic experiences with these brothers and sisters who come from wherever they come from. I know people who have. And I listen to that and I empathize with that. And I can also say, but that hasn't been my experience. And we do that as human beings. If somebody goes out here and calls me the N-word, I can get angry with them, which I don't even get angry anymore. And I'm just using this. But that doesn't mean everybody that looks like this person is out to get me. That's just not real. But if we can't do that even with ourselves, how are we going to do it with people who come from other places?
Yeah. It's kind of like a metaphor for human interactions.
Yeah. And we do that. And whether it's race or whatever, someone is a Trump supporter and I'm not, and so now you're my enemy. We just see the world a little differently. That doesn't mean I can't still treat you with dignity and respect. But if I can't treat you with dignity and respect, what am I going to do with someone who has 5 eyes or 2 heads or looks like an alligator or looks like, they got an egg for a head? I'm going to kill them. You know what I mean?
Yeah, can you imagine the shock of that whenever that actually does happen, right?
It'll get your attention. I tell you that. I
Yeah.
thought I was going to have a heart attack.
Well, so let's talk about that, Reverend Carter, because I mean,
Okay.
it's been so long since we've had you on the show. We've got a lot of people.
It's been about 5 years.
Yeah, we've got a lot of people that haven't heard that story now,
Yeah.
and let's just kind of like just go over
Well,
like what happened to you. What was your experience?
This was one of many, but remember now, I don't believe in UFOs, and I'm trying to do what Jesus wants me to do and all that kind of stuff. And I went to December 28th, 1989. I went with my girlfriend at the time, who later became my first wife. We went to Mexico, Cancun. And, they had bus tours to Chichen Itza to see the pyramids, see the Mayan pyramids, which was something to see. I haven't seen the Egyptian ones. And so hanging out, had a great time. We're there for 10 days, in Mexico. That was a day trip. And it was hot and it was beautiful. My friends were freezing in New York. So we go back home. We always wanted to go home between Christmas and New Year's. And so some friends of mine had invited me to a party in Hell's Kitchen down near Times Square. And I was tired, but I wanted to go. I wanted to show off my tan, and I was real dark from the sun. And, and they were freezing. I wanted to gloat. I wanted to gloat. And so we went. I went. She didn't want to go. And no adult beverages were there. I had some deviled eggs, which I love. And I stayed there for about an hour and a half. I caught the subway back home. And in the middle of the night, I don't know what, to this day, I don't remember where I had to go to the bathroom or whatever, but I felt a presence in the room. I sleep on my stomach. I turned over. There was a being at the foot of the bed. And remember, during this whole time, either my girlfriend could not, or she just didn't wake up. The room is lit up like I'm in Times Square. I'm on the 15th floor of the Excelsior Hotel. So this is it's in Manhattan. There's a being at the edge of my bed about 3-4 feet tall. He's got this blue light around him, like a cobalt blue, and around that, it's the brightness. A jumpsuit with a turtleneck, like a jumpsuit, real spindly looking man. I'm assuming it was a man. And the suit looked like Reynolds wrap. That's how it looked. It would look like Reynolds wrap that I have in there in my kitchen. And he looked at me and I looked at him, and I thought my heart was going to come out of my chest. I pulled the covers up over me. I got in the fetal position. And I've had a gun pulled on me twice, but I was never as scared as that. I pulled the covers up. I heard this whoosh, whoosh, like a wind, and the temperature dropped like I was outside. It felt like I was outside. I pulled the covers down. Nobody was there. Quiet. I woke up my girlfriend and I told her what went on. I was scared to death, and also I was hyped, so I couldn't go back to sleep.
Oh yeah, I can imagine. I was hyped. Yeah.
And this started happening twice a month, full and new moons. They would come. They wouldn't say anything. They would show me pictures in my head. They would paralyze me. After a few of these, I started trying to read up. I went to the bookstore of the Open Center on Spring Street. I felt like I was a little boy buying condoms. I wouldn't even look the cashier in the face. I had a stack of books, and I wouldn't even look at him. And he said to me, "You don't look too good." I remember. And he was bald with dreadlocks. The only dreadlocks he had were on the side. He was a very interesting looking man. And he said, "Is this a hobby or is this for real?" And I said, "It's for real." And he said, "You don't look too good." And he wrote down a number. He said, call that number. You'll be with some people who can help you. And that's how I got in my support group. I bought every book I could find on it. I picked up a book called Encounters by Dr. Edith Fiore. I still have over there on my bookshelf. In the back of the book, it had therapists that you could go to if you had these experiences. I can laugh now, then I couldn't. I couldn't sleep. I wouldn't turn the light out. And they would always come when my girlfriend wasn't there because she worked at night, every new and full moon, not the exact day, but for about 8 months.
That's interesting.
But she regressed me, Dr. Jean Mundy, whose picture is on one of my slides. And she let me know that I was not crazy. She said, like, it's good news is you're not crazy. You can figure out if it's good or bad the other way, but you have been visited. And then years later, Bud regressed me. And that was the beginning of my journey. Since then, I have seen reptilians. I have seen blue people, with someone told me they were for Arcturus. I had a healing from a blonde, blue-eyed brother, big muscular brother. Preston Dennett put me in his book, UFO Healings, Part 2. He put my story in there. And when I came back from seeing you in Nashville, I met a woman there who was a big fan, and she put me in touch with people for speaking engagements and what have you. But to make a long story short, she had a friend that was a lawyer and who was also a psychic. And I said, that's an interesting, I've never met a lawyer. Usually that's left brain, right brain. And she said, she said, listen, I don't know you. So-and-so speaks highly of you. And I told, she said, I heard your story from my friend. She said, have you ever seen a praying mantis before being? I said, no. She said, this is going to sound weird, but I see a praying mantis being around you, and you're going to see him. And what do you say to that? What am I? And I said, okay. 2 nights after that, a praying mantis being came in my room and jumped on my bed there, this far from my face. I had never seen that species before. I had a friend of mine make me a statue of, if you want, I can run and go get it to you. It's right there, of the being that came in my room.
Sure, let's give him.
Okay,
Yeah,
on,
little visual aid here.
Yeah, hold on.
Excellent, absolutely. Yeah, it's a really, really fascinating story. These are some great experiences. I always love to hear these type of experiences.
Now I got to tell you, it doesn't take my faith away in God. This is the blue person that I saw with the big head.
Okay.
But here's the person who came 2 days later.
The praying mantis,
Yeah.
The mantid, the classic mantid. You know what's interesting about that, Reverend Carter, and I've actually got a question for you from the YouTube audience.
Yeah, here's the.
I can't see that
he's
one.
Blonde hair. See him? He's a handsome guy, blonde.
So he's a Nordic.
Yeah. He looks like like he's Swedish or one of those people.
So, the question for you, the mantis is another figure that, and the reptilians too. People will see those in the ayahuasca or like DMT experiences, but more likely in the ayahuasca experiences too.
Well, and I got to tell you again, I can't say they were good or bad. I could say that the blonde person healed my blood clot. I can tell you that. But these people weren't good or bad. They were just there. Like even when I saw the reptilian walk through my wall, and it's easy for them to say, like, the mouth doesn't move, don't be afraid. Well, that's easy for you to say, but what are you going to do with that? Don't be afraid. He touched me, but he never harmed me. I don't know, what can I say to that? They never, these little blonde people, well, they weren't little, they healed a blood clot that I had. So that's why I know these beings are real.
Right.
But I can't say I don't worship them. I don't say, well, all the blondes are the angels and all that. But I think in the Bible, I think that's this is what our ancestors, they saw some of these beings, and they were trying to explain in their language what they were seeing.
Got a question for you, actually, from the YouTube audience, Reverend Carter.
Okay.
They want to
probably
know
see it on-
if you could talk about the puncture wound you experienced.
A puncture wound.
Yeah, that's what
I didn't
this
have a puncture
this
wound.
person is asking.
No, I had
Maybe
a
they
blood
can-
clot.
Okay, that might be it. Maybe they can clarify
Yeah.
that.
Oh yeah, yeah. Oh yeah. Well, that's where these people came.
Yeah.
Okay. July 4th, 2013, 10 minutes to 9:50 p.m. EST, Eastern Standard Time. There's a little backstory I'll tell you quickly. I don't like fireworks. Not
Okay.
that I don't like them, but here, when you go to the fireworks, you get there at 7 o'clock, and they don't start till 9:30. You got to find parking. Mosquitoes are eating you up. People are sitting like you need a lubricant. They're so close. The fireworks are over at 5 of 10. So it takes me 2 hours for a half-hour show. I don't like it. But meanwhile, I'm trying to be a good dad. My daughter and my ex-wife love them. July 13th, 2013, look it up. It was a severe thunderstorm here in Asheville, so they canceled them. I was so happy. But it was a lot of thunder. And I had a lot of friends who fought in Vietnam. And they would tell me about their experiences. Some of them were special forces, some of them were regular army, you know, what they went through. And so they would say, Michael, you would have to sleep through artillery, incoming and outgoing. You'd be sleeping in a foxhole, there'd be mud there. You try to catch a couple hours sleep. I was like, oh my God. And when the thunder was happening, I said to myself, I remember, this is what my buddies went through. Because I couldn't go to sleep. But I was laying on my stomach, like in 1989, I sleep on my stomach, and I felt something in the room. And I got to tell you, when these folks visit me, the air gets real still. I can't explain it. It gets like heavy. You know what? I just can't, I don't know any other word. It gets really quiet and still. It's freaky. Like if they're birds, you probably wouldn't hear them. I turned around, my bedroom's right there, and there was a being with like a page boy haircut, blonde brother. Hair wasn't as long as him, but blonde, muscles, ripped. He had on a robe with a belt that was like a rope. And it's not a hoodie, what do you call them? Like the monks, a cowl. He had that on. Big blue eyes, but you could see his muscles bulging through this robe. Maybe there's a gym on the ship. I don't know. I looked at this guy and he looked at me and he stuck his hand out and a light green apple light came out and it hit me in my stomach. Now, here's the backstory. 2013, I'm getting divorced. My dad died. Sounds like a country western song. And I was going to get fired from my job because I thought I was. I'd wound up keeping it for another year and a half. But this was all happening at once. And this being comes. And so I had a blood clot that was from my ankle to my groin area on my right leg. I have real skinny legs. They look like ostrich legs to me. My right leg looked like LeBron James' leg. I wish my legs were that muscular, but I had a blood clot. I was taking Coumadin, and which they call Wayfarin, and I was injecting myself in my stomach with something called enoxaparin. It's a blood thinner. This guy, well, it wasn't him, but blonde hair. I don't want to say they all look alike, but you get my drift. And when I got out of bed, well, After he left, he just dematerialized. His body, like Star Trek, and the molecules, he was gone. I called Preston because I already had his book about UFO healings. My leg, the blood clot was gone. I called Preston. He's on the West Coast, so it's 10 of 7 there. He wasn't there. I look at my leg again. It's gone. I didn't have the wherewithal to take a picture. I was just buzzing and I was out. But when I saw my ex-wife and my daughter, they were like, "Oh my God, your leg is healed." I said, "Yeah, that's my proof." Well, I mean, they know I had these things before. They knew I wasn't making it up. My big thing was when I went to the doctor to tell them, to show them that my leg had healed, because I had to go back. You know, they stick this thing and they take your blood and they do all that with clots. And the doctor was not having it. The doctor was like, "Oh, come on, what happened?" And I said, "Maybe the medicine's working." He said, "You were just here 10 days ago. I just took your blood work." And finally, I said to the doctor, "Look, aren't you happy for me?" Because they were not letting it go, Adam. Sergio, they were not letting it go. And finally, they said, "Of course we are. Of course we are." But I wound up putting them on the defensive. I said, "Can we just say it's unexplained?" I could not tell my doctor that a blonde-haired extraterrestrial hit me with a green light, and I could not say that. But that's what happened.
Yeah, he probably would have been like, "Oh,
They might have put you in another hospital.
Yeah. They would have taken me to, But that, and then that's, so I didn't have a puncture wound. That's the wound that I was healed of, that blood clot. That was the $100,000 thing there. Oh yeah. Yeah. And I had never seen a blonde, blue-eyed person like that before. My friends in Europe who are contactees, experiencers, they say we see them all the time here. I had never, up to that point, I had never seen that. And then when I meditated the next day, I closed my eyes, that being was there. He looked at me. I remember I closed my eyes and that face was there. And it was 2 of them. And they both blinked at the same time. And I blinked. And I remember opening my eyes and going, "What?" And closing my eyes. And they were there. And I just said, "Thank you." I said, I hope you can hear me. Thank you.
Reverend Carter, do these things happen more to you when you're in kind of like a transition in your life?
That's a great question.
Because it kind of sounds like what you said, like
That's
you were talking about the July, the July 4th time period, and you were going through a divorce. You were kind of looking at maybe your job wasn't going to be around much longer.
Yeah.
Your dad had passed away. A lot of stuff that just kind of happened all at the same time, and then all of a sudden, these experiences happen. Yeah,
there's something to it. Look, because in December, at that time, I was an actor in New York in '89. I was living a fast life. I was drinking and drugging and sexing and smoking, and they came. That was the first time, and they never said to me, "What are you doing?" Mm-hmm. It was just the feeling afterwards was like, "What are you doing? Mm-hmm. What are you doing? This is not what you signed up for." But it was up to me to make that transition. They never said, "We got a lesson for you." It wasn't grandiose. You're the savior, or you're going to be. It was afterwards. It was like someone threw cold water in my face and said, "What are you doing?"
You had an anti-structural lifestyle, as they call it.
Yeah, I was crazy, man. I was an actor in New York. I thought I was going to be Denzel Washington. I wound up being a minister. You know, I was going to be an actor. I mean, I was an actor. And so, and even with my dad, and that's what helped me with the spiritual part, because my heart felt more open. I started being able to say, "I love you" more. I could say I was afraid. I could say I was wrong. I just can't explain it. I got by on less sleep. I just cut my hair. I had long dreadlocks. I just cut them here, but my hair grew faster. My nails and stuff. It was definitely something different. And people would say to me, "You been out in the sun? Where you been?" but I just being in their energy. And then I started doing Reiki. I started doing, so this whole spiritual life opened up. And what their presence did for me was I had to get a grip and say, Michael, some weird things had happened. And I had a painful incident happen that they did. And I had to say, don't do it anymore. And they stopped. But my point, and we can talk about that. But my point is, it made me say, Michael, where else in your life have you let fear rule? Because even though these people look different and they come up different, walking through walls or stuff like that, they have never hurt you. If anything, you've become more human. Do you know what I mean?
Right. So yeah, because you had these experiences, and then it set you onto this path where you are now. Like you became more spiritual, and you became this. You started studying to be a minister,
I was working towards that. Don't get me wrong. They didn't just
gave you the push.
Yes.
They gave you the push.
Yeah, it sped it up.
Right.
It sped it up.
It's interesting, Reverend Carter, because I met you over there at the Alien Expo over there in Knoxville last year. We talked just briefly, and Serfiel and I had the pleasure to see Ray Hernandez's speech there at the conference, and pretty amazing. I mean, the free study and everything that it has entailed, and we talked a little bit about this with Brent Rains as well. And the doctor that he had on with us, I think Robert, they have talked about, one of the things that Ray compared was the near-death experience and the alien contact experience, and just how similar it was, and just how much it had really kind of had changed people's lives. People that have near-death experiences, their lives are changed. There's no doubt. They're less fearful of death, and life is radically improved. But you'll have the most hateful person become like the most loving person after something like that. So it sounds very similar, your experience, to others' experiences with alien contact and near death, which I think in some weird way are kind of one and the same. There's a real spiritual aspect to
it's a rebirth.
These experiences.
It's a rebirth. And I wrote a chapter in that book for free, UFOs Beyond Belief.
Yeah.
I wrote a chapter on UFOs, and it was called the Spirituality of the Experiencer. Ray had asked me to write a chapter on that with someone else, and that's what we talked about. Now, I want to go back to the beginning when we started out. Everybody doesn't have that. And I don't know why. Some people say it's karma. Some people, I don't know why it is. But there are some people who have just the opposite. That it was so terrifying and traumatic. My life has changed, but it's changed a different way.
Just
we got to be able to make room for those stories.
Just like in the NDE, the near-death experiences, people also have hell-like experiences too.
Yes. Yeah.
But the thing is that the people that have those traumatic experiences, their lives become changed.
That's right. That's right.
So like the end result is still the same, no matter if it's a beautiful experience or it's absolutely just terrible experience. People come out of it changed.
You come out of change. Yeah.
And isn't that, Sophia, more the expert on this, isn't that some of the same concepts in occultism?
Well, I mean, it's just the initiatory framework. It's the trial. I mean, that's, and it's psychedelic experiences are similar too, as far as people can have bad trips, but learn a lot from those bad trips. And it's, but I think with the free study, I mean, it really showed that the experiences are overwhelmingly positive. The majority are overwhelmingly positive.
Yes. Yes.
But even those negative experiences keep something positive.
Just like in near-death experiences, the positive experiences outweigh the negative.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's the initiation, and like you said, it's like an initiation almost, because my life totally changed after that. Now, do I enjoy a couple beers and a glass of wine? Sure. But that wasn't my whole thing for living. I'm chasing the carrot, I'm going to get this movie. I'm going to do this show, and I'm going to date this one, and I'm going to go get drunk, and I'm going to do cocaine. I'm just going to, no, it was just like, zoop. Because it was free will. I could have just rejected all that and kept going on my way. But there was something in me that made me go deeper into myself. And I credit myself with that because I was on that path, really. I mean, I was reading and studying, but I was still partying and doing all that. But that was the cold water in my face. And it made me take myself and my life more seriously. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Let's talk a little bit, Reverend Carter, about your presentation, kind of what you're going to be talking about. Just
Sure.
kind of give a brief teaser.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to be showing some slides and about for some biblical scenes and talking about from Old Testament and New. We can get into both, and in the time allotted, and talk about why I believe that if you put the word angel, if you put ET or off-world into whatever, in every place you see the word angel in the Bible, it makes more sense because angel just means messenger. And so how our ancestors interacted with these beings and how some of these beings may be responsible, not intentionally, for the biblical religion as we know it, for Judaism as we know it, and for Christianity as we know it. I will argue that Jesus of Nazareth was either a hybrid or had very close contact with these off-world intelligences. And for me, that does not change his ministry at all, but that there's a possibility that he was such an advanced soul that he was having these contacts as well.
That could be a little, well, I don't know in our crowd, but that'd be a little controversial in some other crowds, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, but I want to be clear. This is from what I'm saying. It doesn't mean they have to take it as gospel.
Yeah.
But that's what we're talking about. We can agree to disagree, but I'm just saying where the evidence leads me. And it's like anything else. If there's some truth there, it'll stick with them. I'm not here to convince. I'm just going to give you what I'm saying, and you can go, "Oh, come on, man, that's crazy," and that's fine. We'll both sleep well at night. I'm not here to make you believe me. I'm just telling you what I think is a possibility.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I do appreciate you doing it. I don't know if you can see my shirt. It says,
yes, humans aren't real.
On
Yeah,
so
that's a little bit, but also in talking about how what we have to do to try to, we have to grow spiritually, whether it's ETs or not. It can be just your religion or being in nature, but we're going to have to live out these principles. Otherwise, we're going to destroy ourselves. And that's the bottom line for me. Yes, it's like my friends who were in Vietnam. Those that survived, they were talking about, well, how are you going to act when you get back to the world? How are you going to act? Which was really, how are you going to act after you've had this experience? You've just been in war. And now you're going back to the world. How are you going to behave? Okay, well, now that I've had these experiences, how am I going to act now? What's the transformation, if any, when I get back in the world? Am I going to be more loving? Or am I going to at least try to be? How am I going to act now? I've had these experiences. What's that going to do? Because I got to go back to living life.
Yeah. Yeah, it's very, very similar. Very similar.
I got to go back to living life.
Well, so Reverend Carter, everybody that has already bought their ticket or they're thinking about buying a ticket, you are speaking at 12:15 to 1:15. That's Eastern time on Saturday, the 26th. So
I'll be there.
So come up next Saturday, and we really appreciate you being a part of this. And please tell everybody where they can find you right now if people want to get in touch
Okay.
or they want to see what
Yeah, you
and
can.
talk in your books as well.
You can go to Amazon.com. Just type in Reverend Michael J.S. Carter. My website is Reverend Michael J.S. Carter. And you can also email me at michaeljscarter@gmail. I will answer any queries. I get back to you as quickly as I can. I don't check my website that often. If you prefer to leave a message that way, I'll get to it. And you can go to Amazon, and I have 4 books, 2 on spirituality and 2 on extraterrestrial life, and UFOs Beyond Belief is the book that I've written the chapter for about about spirituality and the experiencer. I'm looking forward to it. I want y'all to stay healthy, and no matter what happens, keep the love in your heart. This will end. The virus will end, and we still got to learn to love each other. So don't get discouraged. If you got to turn the TV off, turn the news off for a couple of days, but we'll be okay. But we got to hang in there with each other.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah. No truer words were spoken.
Yeah, got to hang in there. Don't let the fear make you crazy.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree.
Don't do it.
All right, Reverend Carter, thank you so much for joining us. Stay
All right,
with us just
brothers.
for a little bit. We will be back with Guy Malone at about 4 Eastern Standard Time. See you guys on the streams then.
Hey everybody, we are live on Facebook and on YouTube, Conspirinormal Podcast. And as you can see, Bigfoot down there is holding the record album Selling the Sizzle. Who's that by, Bigfoot?
We're selling
What's
the
that?
Sizzle of the Strange Realities 2020 streaming conference.
Yes, we are. And we have Mr. Guy Malone is with us.
Hey, buddy.
Guy, welcome back to Conspirinormal.
Welcome back, or good to be back again. You guys are
good to
looking
have you
scary today.
Yeah. And this thing is really
Oh,
hot.
that's even scarier.
We're just going to talk a little bit about the Strange Realities Conference and what we got going on. And just a few kind of housekeeping things about that. I think it's a good thing to do. So we're about as we're streaming this now on September 15th, in about 10 days. Just a big housekeeping thing for everybody. We are streaming this thing live on Facebook. Okay? So that means some of you may be watching this on the Strange Realities secret Facebook page, which is one person. So that means that you already know what you're doing. So congratulations. So we want to just re-emphasize the point. If you do not have Facebook, make a Facebook account and get on there.
Or use someone else's that you have in your household.
Yeah. Just be sure you answer the 2 questions to get into this private Facebook account, private Facebook group, because those 2 questions are if you've bought a ticket and what name you bought the ticket under. Because sometimes you may want to just use another name on your Facebook account, already have another name on your Facebook account. Right. So that's vitally important. So anything you want to add to that, Sir Phil, what I was just talking about?
Really, this is just the best way to do it at this point. We want to find some other ways in the future. I know there are definitely reasons why it's not optimal to be depending on a private Facebook group, but as of right now, it is really the best way to do this. YouTube has a lot less capabilities than it used to have for things like this. And, we don't even know about a future for really doing this on Facebook, as they are probably moving against things like this, as well as music streams and, things that were announced real recently. But for this one, it's what we're going to do. And we're going to have the videos on there to see for as long as we can. If we do encounter any problems with them, we will find another way to host the videos to give everyone access to those after the conference. That's going to be a big element of this because I know not everyone is going to be able to catch the speakers they want to see in particular at those times. And then also, you'll just have the freedom to go back and revisit things because there'll be a lot of cool information.
Yeah, and also we're doing this when you guys see the schedule, which I'm going to post here fairly soon onto the website. That's all on Eastern time, so that's going to be obviously different for everybody since we got everybody's schedule. We've pretty much got a lot of people all different parts of the country and all different parts of the world. So we just want to make sure that you guys are aware of that. Now, not everybody's going to be up at like 3 o'clock in the morning in England or somewhere like that. So you guys will be able to see this. So looks like Guy is back. So Guy, we're happy to have you at the Strange Realities Conference coming up here. This is your second year because you were actually with us here in Nashville in 2019.
Yeah, it was a great time too. Yeah, thank you. Different topic, but it was a great time.
Yeah, everyone can go back and watch that because we got that posted on YouTube and everything now. It was a really cool presentation.
I did want to recommend that, actually. I'm glad you brought that up, sir, because I'm the lectures, I do it sort of as a 1-2 punch because the topic I'm doing this year won't be as popularly received, I don't think. People will be very disinclined to believe the hypothesis, are aliens demons? Here's the evidences that a lot of people attribute to what's called the demonic hypothesis as opposed to the extraterrestrial hypothesis. So when I'm going into it, knowing how unpopular an idea or even preposterous that could be to some people, for my first trick, as you remember, I do the Roswell crash talk and basically put forth a ton of research showing people that this was most likely a man-made event. And if people listen to that research, and you were there, I saw when you streamed it a while back, someone said Jennifer Campbell, it was their favorite presentation from last year's, which was
yeah, she did. Mm-hmm. Yeah,
that was an honor, actually. I wouldn't expect that because I know even that's an unpopular view. But the point is, I can do the research and I prove myself, I think, to actually put forth a very unpopular view convincingly. So with that as my track record, I hope at least people that are returning from last year or who are watching it online this year will go, okay, well, we'll give this guy a chance with this one, but I don't know.
Yeah, we were happy to stream all that. That gave everybody kind of a nice little preview, and I actually got to rewatch that because I had seen that. I'd actually gone to see you in Roswell back in 2017, and got to help you out with your conference over there during the 70th anniversary of the whatever crash at the Roswell, New Mexico. For people that may have not heard that presentation, can you kind of give like a little bit of what the skinny is on that?
Yeah, it was 1947 was the Roswell incident, where very believable, credible story that a craft of unknown origin crashed in the desert and was retrieved, brought back by the Army Air Base, eventually to Roswell, New Mexico. It didn't happen in Roswell, New Mexico. But there was a cover-up, and people thought eventually that it might be from outer space, and they tried to squash that story for a while. And it was definitely know the name Stanton Friedman and other authors in the 70s started pushing, really digging for the extraterrestrial explanation of that Roswell crash, which has been the prevailing or most very popular view, at least in pulp fiction and in Conspirinormal conspiracy crowds.
And Conspirinormal too. Yeah.
Yeah, you're ahead of your time with that one there. Surprised nobody coined that phrase decades ago. Good job, Adam.
Thank you.
But I guess the most popular belief is that the Roswell crash was alien in origin, and the U.S. government covered it up. So we have this Roswell UFO festival every year, where speakers and enthusiasts come from all over the world, either to hear serious lectures on the topic, most of them putting forth the alien view, showing their evidences or their reasons for believing it was alien. And you've seen as well, you have people dressing up who really don't care about what's the truth or what's reality. They just, let's get drunk and put on some costumes and have a good time. Bring the kids out, buy some cotton candy. So that's the festival atmosphere. So in the midst of that, based on research I was doing in the early 2000s, when I first put it up on 2002, I put forth a very well-received man-made or an alternative view showing that it was a man-made incident that mostly involved the work of the aircraft was designed based on German Nazi scientists, models and prototypes that they were building for Hitler in World War II. Nowadays, everybody's almost anyway heard of this Operation Paperclip, where we know our government moved German soldiers over here. But in the 40s, in 1947, during the Roswell incident, that was not common knowledge. It was above top secret. To some degree, it was happening against the direct orders of our president at the time. But all I do with that presentation is I do side-by-side photographs and drawings of the Roswell incident, the witnesses, the stuff that's published in all the popular books. Here's what they say they saw. Here's what they cleaned up. And then put it side by side with the German designs from the 1940s. And it's, for many people, it's a slam dunk. The show's over right then. As soon as you see that what the witnesses from Roswell were drawing or were claiming that they worked with looks just like the German craft from the 1940s. And it went over pretty well at your event. It usually kind of does. I see some chat.
It was that's our little private chat. Yeah, this definitely was quite. I think you really had everybody kind of on the edge of their seats on that one.
Yeah.
This was kind of a and I think what you're going to do this time is kind of a sequel to that. But I want to talk a little bit about just what's life like there in Roswell, because I mean you came back to Nashville a little while. That's kind of where you and I became friends. But what's life like in Roswell, New Mexico, in the center of alien UFO weirdness?
That one weekend a year is when it's at the peak weirdness. But as hard as it is for a lot of people to picture, not so much for you because you've literally been here, but it's kind of a quiet, small city, big town, bordering on 50,000 population. We probably are over 50,000. The census is coming up, but in the I showed up here for the first time in 1999 after moving from Nashville, and the census then all the work was everybody register for the census so we can break 50,000, and that's great for federal funding. That's great for Olive Garden and big businesses that'll come to your town once you hit that magic number of 50. So it's been bordering on 50,000 since 1999, but it's not a huge city. It is very tourism driven. Let's leave COVID out of the equation for now anyway. There's more hotels per capita than almost anywhere you can imagine you are. In Nashville, you drive up and down, you see a Shoney's and a church on every other corner. Here, you drive down Main Street and West 2nd, and you see hotels. You do that frequently. So we get a lot of tourism here, and a lot of it's business tourism. The cattle industry is really big here, or really the dairy industry. You were joking earlier about the flies here. That hasn't changed.
Yeah, when Rob and I were there about 3 years ago, it was just like we were overcome by flies. There were just flies everywhere. And we were like, what's up with all the flies? And I asked you about it, and you said, oh, it's the cattle yards. And I was like, okay, well, that makes sense. I thought maybe Beelzebub had taken up camp in Roswell, New Mexico. I think that's what Dr. Heiser would have said, right? Pretty much.
Maybe. Flies, yeah.
Roswell is interesting because just about everywhere you go has some kind of weird UFO theme. There's the McDonald's with the UFO with the flying saucer embedded in it, and there's where Rob and I stayed, the Motel 6. There was this interesting Roswell
I know
or
that
like these alien like chainsaw art things.
Yeah.
And an interesting thing that happened to me not too long ago, I was actually at work and I was making a delivery, and this a couple of months ago, and I saw one of those in front of somebody's house, like the green alien chainsaw art statue, and I was like, and I asked him, I was like, I've seen one of those. I went to Roswell and saw him, like, oh, my dad went to Roswell and brought that for me. We're from there.
Oh, I want to picture. They're from there, living in Nashville?
Yeah, they're from there living in Nashville, just the reverse of you.
Oh, we should change phone numbers or something.
Reverse of you, guy.
Yeah.
But let's talk just a little bit. I want to just give everybody a teaser. Obviously, we're not going to talk about like the meat of it, but kind of what are you going to be speaking about at our conference coming up next weekend?
I will go back. You said all those, you see these alien images everywhere you go. These images everywhere, and we're saturated with it. And I'll be giving you, just from photographs of walking around the town, a little preview of that. I like to start out so people kind of know, you know, what's it like to live in Roswell with that. But to the point that it's actually, some people love it because it's money. Some people hate it because it's either, they either think it's ridiculous or they might think it's demonic. It's similar to what we were talking about, the cattle and the flies, actually, is that for purpose of analogy, Roswell has like 60 dairies in the whole county. It's one of the main dairy capitals of the world. And you'll find this interesting in your business, is that there's literally the milk company here, Leprino, they literally process over 1 million gallons of milk per day for making cheese. But you and I can't go to the store and buy Leprino cheese off the shelf. You would not believe there's a ton of employment here because of the cheese plant and the dairy. So it's great for the economy. What's the downside? Well, in the summer, the flies are pretty bad, as you've seen. So sort of by similarity, by analogy that I've never made before, so I'm doing this off the cuff, is this alien thing is also a good source of income for the town. It does bring tourism. It brings people taking their pictures, tourism dollars, taxation revenue for New Mexico. But the downside is you might say the love of money is the root of all evil. My experiences myself, I lean into this topic based on my personal experiences with so-called visitors. I really don't think they were aliens, but then that's an experiences that were repeated in my childhood that I, for the most part, kept to myself. Didn't talk to it about a lot of people. Learned some painful lessons with friendship when you do bring that sort of stuff up when you're, young and the world doesn't really know much. Actually, the pre-internet world didn't have access to conspiracy theories and stuff like we do now. But after the Heaven's Gate cult suicide that happened in the late 90s, as a point of reference, I started studying their beliefs, and that the way they claimed was that the leaders were the reincarnation of Jesus and the Father, and that the way to heaven was to hop on this UFO that was passing by the Earth on the comet Hale-Bopp, and then they even claimed that their beliefs kind of spun out of the Bible too. So that put me, that kind of shocked me that 39 people would kill themselves based on a belief system that, to my mind, outlandish, weird, strange, whatever. It's America. You're free to believe what you want to believe. But the idea that the way to heaven was to board a UFO after killing yourself, that's some crazy doctrinal belief if you're going to pin it to the Bible. So it put me on a big search of actually exploring the belief systems of the UFO cults and the contactees and the experiencers. Adamski, for instance, people whose work has been covered for decades that were prominent in the 50s and 70s. And one of the three ways I look at the topic of, are aliens really demons or demonic creatures pretending to be aliens? And you can lighten up the word a little bit, because I know that's a very religious word. The idea that demons even exist is probably preposterous to a lot of people. But if you just go with the semantics of paranormal, jinn, genies, other dimensional entities, shadow people, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I think people in this realm that would be in your audience, they'd be willing to hear it out. Like 500 years ago, for example, a common analogy. Even Whitley Strieber made this example, actually, now I think about it, but I quote it in my book from the 90s as well, is that 500 years ago, like in Europe, you had a similar experience to what we are calling the alien abduction phenomena. But it was called elves and fairies then. You had little wee people with big eyes and advanced magic, they would have believed then, magic wands. They would abduct loners, take them from their homes. In those cases, they went out to the woods. They'd have lewd sex or dancing and weird things, and then the person would be returned to their home or their bed with just wild stories of the night they had with the fairies. And my belief is that it's the exact same phenomena, just interpreted under a different guise nowadays. What we used to call elves and fairies, we are now calling aliens. So I'll give a little bit of a research into what some of the main contactees and UFO cults that have been, they claim to be in communication with aliens. I go through a lot of books on the PowerPoints and just give you direct quotes about what are aliens telling people. What are aliens leading people to believe in? And I also quote like Carl Sagan, Dr. Mack from Harvard, John Mack, MD, a lot of non-religious, non-Christian, and non-spiritual scientists and researchers on what they believe aliens are telling people and how they are directing society, and kind of compare it to a biblical worldview. And you eventually you get this very interesting contrast. It's a 180 degrees different from anything the Bible talks about. Where it speaks of spirituality, the aliens bring a very different message, actually. And it's not just different, it's 180 degrees opposed, diametrically opposed, I'd say. But again, kind of like that Roswell talk, it's one thing for me to say, I believe the Roswell incident was man-made. But when the people give me an hour to lay out the evidence or the proof, they're like, wow, he convinced me. In many cases, a large part of the audience. So I kind of try to repeat that trick with this. I take a premise that I think people are going to, at face value, consider preposterous, and then lay down some evidences. Again, John Mack, Carl Sagan, the Bible, Whitley Strieber, other experiencers and abductees, and just to paint a picture of that this is not a benevolent aliens here to help us kind of thing. I really believe it's demonic forces here to fool us. And I lay out that evidence and let people go, maybe not.
So being where you are, Guy, kind of like in the center of UFO world, I guess, for lack of a better term, doing this presentation and, like you've basically have started like a ministry there that's kind of like the UFO themed kind of Christian ministry. Like, how much resistance do you get?
Surprisingly little, but if you turn the question around and ask how much support do you get, surprisingly little. Little of both.
So it's kind of like equal. It's kind of equal, huh? It's not really.
Yeah, I really think the one thing I guess I've got going is that I make a calm, non-hyper religious presentation. I usually don't come across, unless I'm trying to sound like I'm crazy, that's fun from time to time. Paint myself up or, all those other fun stuff I've done. But one, I just present information and let people make up their own mind. And in most cases, I'm told I do a pretty good job presenting some information that is very convincing in a way that about a view that people did not think at the front they would believe. But on the money, on the society side of it, it makes a lot of money here. This UFO alien thing makes a lot of money here. So to kind of combat it or come up with an idea that's saying this is really bad or this is really questionable, you're not going to get a lot of support because, like I said, the love of money is the root of all evil. The prevailing view in Roswell, even when I show you in my presentation, the city logo with an alien on it, the official Twitter account, it's like little benevolent deities here that have blessed Roswell. And, we're known the world over. You can go to Tokyo and say the word Roswell, You don't even have to say Roswell, New Mexico. People know what you're talking about. We've got brand recognition. It draws in tourism. It makes money. Therefore, it is good. So it's, other than friends and a church here and there, it's hard to get any real support, even though I am presenting the gospel to people in the local, the whole package side of the deal. But if you ask about the UFO museum or the UFO industry, I think on both sides, they would rather just ignore me and not have to respond. I don't get a lot of flack. I don't get a lot of opposition, because then I would have to be acknowledged. You know, you're not going to, and then when they look into my information, it's pretty darn convincing. So let's not pick a fight with this guy, you know? I think that's how it's played out.
Yeah. I want to know if you find that there's a lot more activity in Roswell because it's kind of set up as this like temple to the aliens, pretty much. Like, do you find in your ministry that there's a lot, does it seem like there's a lot more activity of people having these type of experiences than other places because it's almost like inviting it?
Yeah, that's a great question. Like, you're opening the door, it's definitely the Mecca. For some reason, there may be many reasons, I don't think there's a ton more paranormal activity or people claiming alien experiences that live in Roswell, that are, that this is their home. I'd say on average, it's probably the same as in Nashville, maybe a little more, maybe a little less. And I know in some areas you can have heavy occult influences. Mm-hmm. Here, other than what we've talked about, Roswell has like over 100 churches as well. So it's in some ways a fairly conservative, well-grounded Christian community in that sense, to where the people that live here aren't, for the most part, jumping into the occult and opening themselves to certain experiences, which I think do overlap with the alien abduction. You remember Sleep Paralysis Talk by Mike. He has a stage name. He has a stage name that I can't remember right now. But
Tom Bionic. Yeah.
Thank you. Yes. Yeah. The $6 million. Yes. Yeah. But Surf, it's the people that come here. When I had a shop downtown years back across from the UFO museum, people would come here with their stories, and many of them that were already deeply into this stuff, they'd tell me that they'd be 2-3 hours outside of Roswell and they'd see a light in the sky. I do hear, in answer to your question, it's yes, there is a fair amount of activity, but you hear about it from the tourists who came here already predisposed to be involved with
like this. A pilgrimage kind of.
Yeah, it's definitely a Mecca. That's a good word for it. I've used that analogy in the past, that if you're an experiencer or an abductee, or if you just have a really, really strong intellectual curiosity, or if it's just for fun and giggles, Roswell is a Mecca that draws people that are curious about that, because they think they're going to get some sort of life-changing truth or life-changing experience here. At least in the back of their mind, they're hoping for that, I think. Mm-hmm. So it's been it's sometimes when you meet a guy that comes and tells you the exact opposite of what you were hoping to hear, that can be a let you down experience. Yeah. But I've also had a lot of people actually just thank you, for presenting this to me in a way that I've never heard before. So it's a little bit of both, actually. I don't do it full time downtown anymore like I used to, but I do pass out these calendars of events, every hotel in Roswell. Rather than doing conferences and rather than having a storefront where people come in and I talk to them, I did that in the years past. But now I have a little calendar of events. It's called the Ros Guide. Oh, is this one? It kind of is, yeah. I don't know if you can see this perfectly. Just have things to do in Roswell, and I just list the concerts and the plays and, little things going on, the museums, things to see. And at the very bottom of it, there's a QR code reader that actually takes tourists, anybody. You aim your phone at it, and you'll get my YouTube talks. So you might say I've sort of automated the ministry. Mine is more a ministry of information and letting people make up their own mind. I just give you kind of just the facts, ma'am. So that's actually the bulk of what I do as far as a ministry is I have these little cards in every hotel in Roswell for the people, the tourists that are coming here to learn the truth. They'll go to the UFO museum. They'll spend some money. They'll buy a T-shirt downtown, but quite often they leave with 2 videos of me discussing the topic online for them, and then I'll get a little email or something from people that have seen it. In fact, Adam knows I'm not waiting tables full time now, but for most of the time in Roswell, I was a waiter at one of the popular restaurants, and I was actually I've had people tell me like they checked into their hotel at night, and then they come out the next night or whatever like that. I've actually waited on people to where the guy, he looks at me and goes, "Wait a minute, I'm just watching a video with you on it. You're on YouTube, aren't you?" I'm like, "Yeah, that's me."
Actually, I think I told somebody about this not that long ago about there was one of the YouTube videos, somebody actually took that and made it and were like claiming that you were a reptilian.
Oh, I love that one. No, that's a pretty old one, unless it's a newer new one. But yeah, I know the one you mean.
Yeah, it's the same one. I don't.
Yeah, was I in a green shirt? I think that was honestly from the 2007.
I think so. Yeah. I know Dr. Future was at one of those conferences, I think, or was he at a couple of them?
Yeah, Christian Symposium on Aliens.
Yeah. We'll be talking to the doc later on tonight. So
say hi. He did a great presentation on that. It was really since you mentioned that to have 3 PhDs gathered in one place presenting similar information to mine or to back up what I'm going to be offering your people. That was a pretty good feeling. It took a while. William Alner, PhD.
Okay.
Michael Heiser, Dr. Future, but Mike Bennett, and actually by proxy, Stephen Eulish. He wrote in, but he couldn't travel that year. But again, I think the topic that I'm tasked with presenting for you are aliens, demons. Ooh, evidence that makes you go, I think honestly, I know it sounds preposterous at first, and I think large part is because people just don't believe demons exist. Period. So to make the case, actually, I'm glad you brought it up because and I remember historically speaking, like lifetime achievement wise, weird way to say it, to have 3 PhD. What I was saying is very complementary views that very intricately work together. That was made me feel like I was on the right track, or that I think I always knew I was on the right track, but I think it let other people see that maybe this guy's on the right track.
Well, we were just speaking just a few hours ago to Reverend Michael Carter, who I actually had you on the show with quite a few years ago. And we talked about how we kind of talked about you guys' experiences, kind of like how you guys kind of come from a common kind of background religiously, and then how like your experiences were similar, how they were different, what you got out of each experience. And he is actually going to be presenting on the same day you are, just a few hours before you, about UFOs and the Bible. And so he's going to be talking about how like some of the, he I guess he believes somewhat in like a physical existence of these beings. I know that you're much more on the spiritual side, as am I. But there seems to be like his experiences seem very spiritual in nature, and for him they were very positive experiences as well, whereas yours kind of leaned much more towards the negative.
Torment, rape, pain, and then indoctrination. That would be a brief, succinct way of saying it, maybe. I don't really try to describe it.
I think that's a good way. I think that's a good way to put it. So, like, what's kind of your response to people that have these much more when they're talking about these more positive experiences? Do you think they're actually having, for the most part, positive experiences, or is there kind of is there more going on here?
Yes, I think they could be having positive experiences, but also, yes, I think there's also more going on. And I think Joe Jordan's put it real well in the years past. It's a good cop, bad cop scenario where you have the one that seems to have your best interests at heart, helping you out and doing you favors, and in some ways protecting you from the one who just wants to slam you in jail and make all these threats. So you kind of side with the good cop eventually, give them what they want without ever realizing that the two are working together and on the same team the whole time. The thing is, I remember when we talked with Dr. Carter, he and I got
one of my favorite shows. I mean, it really was one of my favorite shows from that time. Yeah.
I should listen to it again, but I do recall he and I got along great. It wasn't a debate. He presented his experiences and his views. I presented mine and my views. But what I find about this topic specifically, aliens, abduction, demonic, or whatever like that, is that I've seen not just, I don't know how Dr. Carter presents it, but I know like the History Channel had their UFOs in the Bible series years ago, which you might even say was the pilot episode or the precursor to the whole Ancient Aliens series. I think actually Dr. Heiser, Mike, he actually he got this look in his eye like he complimented, said, yeah, that is a good way to put it. That the show that both he and I were interviewed for actually on History Channel years ago, UFOs in the Bible, it turned out like that was the pilot or the kickstart to the whole ancient, but it presents the view that the fire by night, cloud by day that Moses and the Israelites followed was really a UFO that God was working through. These many aliens, when I present it to you, many aliens literally tell people in their experiences, positive or negative for that matter, that think much that you read in the Bible is really a UFO experience. And even something as some would say crazy as the idea that Mary was not really born of a virgin, but that she was artificially inseminated with alien DNA, and that Jesus was a hybrid, and that's why he
that actually came up when we talked to Reverend Carter.
Which kind of disheartens me, makes me sad. But to me, it eventually the logic on that, or the reasoning that people use, and the reason that is almost an easy sell for people, is that you will make the claim that, well, people 2,000 years ago, they didn't understand genetics, they didn't understand DNA. So the idea of an artificial insemination would have been a little, beyond their science, beyond their head. So it was the primitive, stupid, superstitious people of thousands of years ago that just called UFOs and aliens gods and angels and devils. They didn't know what they were pre-scientific. They were superstitious. It's like the Arthur C. Clarke that any advanced technology appears as magic to one generation or to one era. If you take a lighter or this computer or a TV or something like that back a few hundred years in time, it's going to be indistinguishable from magic, like he says. But I think it just calls people to make a choice. Is that I turn that argument around, and I kind of like to say that the scientific and the unspiritual and kind of the spiritually dead people of this generation, when we're confronted with a genuinely supernatural experience, we try to superimpose science to explain it away. Oh no, that wasn't really a ghost or a poltergeist or an alien. It was swamp gas or a hallucination, or you must have eaten some bad mushrooms, years ago back in the day, and it's you're tripping, you're flashbacking. So just take the example I used. Either what the Bible says, that Mary was a virgin and that there was a supernatural divine birth, born of the Holy Spirit, and that is where Jesus came from, and he is God in the flesh, Son of God, I and the Father are one. Either that's true the way the Bible states it, and you and I and everybody in the world is free to choose whether they believe that statement or not, or you can turn it around and say aliens impregnated Mary, and Jesus was a hybrid child, and that's why he had superpowers. Everything, that's one example of many I could offer. Everything about this topic actually calls you to make a choice on what you believe and don't believe. And it's very central to what you believe about the Bible, God, Jesus, and even eternity. And spoiler, that's many of the quotes that I give in the talk that I'll be doing for you this weekend. I'm literally showing you out of the mouths of contactees and abductees, and in the books by John Mack of Harvard, Dr. Carla Turner, PhD. I'm giving you the exact direct quotes about what people either under hypnosis or as they remember are saying. Here's what the aliens told me. I'll give you like easy dozen quotes. And then you will see, even if you're not a Christian, I think if you're an American in this day and age, you have enough, quote, Bible knowledge or cultural Christianity to realize, whoa, what these boogers are saying is really 180 degrees diametrically opposed to what the Bible teaches. So I keep coming back to it whenever I'm this deep or getting pretty deep into this conversation, is that you're going to be swayed by one view or another, and it is going to call you to make a choice. In some cases, an eternal choice, and I really think that's the point of it, is that the aliens are calling people to make eternal choices that go against what the Bible teaches us about salvation in Jesus. And that's how you get a UFO cult suicide of 39 people, because they believed a deceiving doctrine. That's what 1 Timothy says. You'll see that near the end of my lecture. Deceiving spirits and doctrines of devils. Aliens are giving these doctrines like Mary was impregnated by an alien, or like the Israelites followed a UFO. That was the fire by night. That Elijah jumped on a chariot of fire. That was a UFO that took him up into heaven. That when Jesus rose and ascended into heaven in front of the disciples, he was just really being beamed back up aboard the mothership. It's one reality or another, though. I mean, it's a black and white stark contrast. By the time I'm done, I don't think the viewer or listener will have much room for choosing a shade of gray.
Yeah, I don't think you necessarily have to be a Christian to get the thing about that. A lot of it that's going on with the Ancient Aliens crowd is trying to explain all these type of incidents as in a materialistic kind of viewpoint. I don't think you need to even be a Christian. It's like just accept that, like, this is mystical stuff that's happening. This is mystical literature. It's not, in some ways, it may not even be meant to be taken quite literally. So, like, but even then, it's like, don't you kind of like, I kind of lose patience with the kind of materialistic crowd, because it's like they want to explain things all by this materialism, which is really where Ancient Alien stuff comes in, if you really think about it. And just besides the fact of what you're saying about making a choice, but it's like just understanding mysticism and religion and all these ideas, and it's just trying to do the materialist thing just doesn't really wash too much with me when there's so much more going on. And I think it's just trying to just like understand it from some kind of weird scientific viewpoint, and then it becomes its own, but then it becomes its own kind of religion, which is which is kind of the irony of it.
Yeah, there's a little bit of faith required on either end of it, actually. But that materialistic worldview that leads towards the Ancient Aliens belief, just as a meme. Actually, I saw it on a T-shirt once. It had a pyramid, and I liked it. It said, "Just because white people can't do it, doesn't mean it was aliens."
Yeah. I've seen that shirt.
But then I wanted to mention how even the most on the other side, people are still in the non-materialist paradigm, but even on the other side, the most die-hard occultist people who are into these ideas do acknowledge like the trickster element of whatever these things are.
You're right. So, that's why I kind of alluded to jinns, genies, stuff like
that.
I think that would be a more palatable term to a lot of people than saying demons outright. And I'm just using a biblical word. You can trickster is excellent. I do think that's just an excellent way to say it, because
so then, like you said, it makes you really you have to decide, well, what do you think about demons then? You have to really, like you said, it forces that that choice then? Do you think this is something you should interact with or not? Or do you think this is well-meaning or not?
Good point, because even before I was a Christian, I became a Christian in my 20s. So occasionally I still can reflect on how preposterous I might sound occasionally, whether I'm talking about demons, aliens, or just the gospel itself. I mean, when you get down to it, belief that a man rose from the dead, that's just the price of admission. That's the ticket to this Christianity thing. And I'm sure there are a lot of Christians today, the studies show, that they, just like we're talking about the UFO cults, they are whitewashing and they are de-supernaturalizing the Bible themselves just because they have a scientific mindset. But in that trickster element, somehow years ago, when I was like 20, 21, college age, partying with my friends and all that stuff, my roommate got a Ouija board that he wanted to bring into the house and play with. And I'm like, no, that's not coming in here. I'd been to church 5 times in my life, maybe. I didn't have a strong feeling doctrinally, but I'm like, no, wait a minute. So basically you're inviting spirits to come into your home and communicate with you, and you're just supposed to believe that they're good and have your best interests at heart. I would not have used the term deceiver or trickster that early, 30 years ago almost. But yeah, that was my feeling about it, that there's a trickster element to the paranormal that can't be ignored, and that many greater researchers than I have pointed it out. Even people at your conferences last year, Adam.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's this is going to be interesting. I think Saturday is going to be really, really interesting to have these two we're going to have two kind of contrasting talks here, because we've got yours, and then before yours we have Reverend Carter's UFOs in the Bible. So this is going to be, we're definitely going to be giving people a wide variety of viewpoints at this conference.
And I want that, actually. I'm not into censorship. And
Same here.
My whole approach at the end of the day is, here's the information I have. Make up your own mind. If I'm convincing or not, or if,
You are going to be speaking Eastern time at 4:10 to 5:10, which is 2:10 to 3:10 for you.
Right.
So you're going to be speaking then, and you're going to be presenting on, what's the full text of it? The full title?
Are aliens demons? Evidences that make you go, Cool. First time I've used that title for it before. I've played around with different titles for almost the exact same presentation.
Is that an homage to the CNC Music Factory?
Yes, and that's an homage to you in a way, because like when I first was trying to pass this view off as I think it was, are aliens demons? Evidences for a spiritual point of view, where I'm trying to sound smart and non-threatening, and sometimes I've gone what is it? Not against flesh and blood. Are aliens demons? And and then that's targeted to Christians as a buzzword. But you've got a laid back approach, and your crowd is from many walks of life, open-minded, but not afraid to think either. Mm-hmm. Not afraid to test and hear out. So many people, I mean, just the way Facebook and Google have got us all compartmentalized now, to where we sort of live in echo chambers. The work that you're doing, even putting Dr. Carter and I, in the same weekend, much less the same day, you're letting people be exposed to things they probably have not heard before, but you also have the ability, the gift to draw people from that diverse of backgrounds, and they're willing to hear something out. They're willing to walk away educated or changed, when so many other conferences out there, they're just parroting the same thing. You're going to a conference, you're hearing 10 speakers who all believe what you believe before you came, who all know what you know because you've done the same research, and you're just affirming each other's point of view. I like the way you do things. People they're gonna hear things they've never heard before, and they're gonna walk away, oh, that was interesting. I learned something. That might or might not change my mind in this one area. If I hear out Dr. Carter, we'll see if he changes my mind for that matter. But ain't scared.
Yeah, thank you so much for that, Guy. I mean, it's going to be great to have both of you on board with us. I think it's going to be really interesting. We really do have a wide array of presenters. Before we let you go, tell everybody where they can find your ministry, your website, where they can get help with Bitcoin.
Thanks. Yeah. I've changed up, like you had mentioned. I moved away from here for 5 years, so I've sort of had to kind of re-up or rethink what I'm doing. So alienstranger.com is an old site that does have my 2010 videos on it, on these very topics that we're doing. And you can also link through and read my book, Come Sail Away, that actually part of that book is my own personal experiences with visitors when I was young. I don't think they were aliens. You make up your own mind. But that book, or that story sort of helps you walk through not my theology, not my Bible knowledge, but my personal life path from youth to adulthood in coming to the conclusion that these experiences of mine were demonic. They weren't aliens. They were demonic. So, but also alienstranger.com and or roswellmission.org. They both give, it's a slightly more updated videos on the same topics with some newer information. So that's two good places to start. alienstranger.com, roswellmission.org. I kind of feel like I need to learn how to morph these into one side again.
We just cloned Surfiel. Sorry.
Oh, no.
Oh. That's a frozen image, isn't it?
Yeah,
Okay.
I don't know. There we go.
Millions.
Sorry about that, Guy. Sorry.
Yeah. No
We
worries.
interrupted your train of thought there.
My train of thought wrecked a long time ago. Yeah, roswellmission.org, alienstranger.com. It's got all the goods. It's free. I do have a book. I have videos, but you can watch it all online and read the book online. And yeah, as you said, if anybody later wants to hit me up, just my email it on this topic, or like you said, Bitcoin. I do have in the last couple years, last 4 years, I've really for some reason soaked up a lot of Bitcoin knowledge as a passion and a personal sovereignty freedom. It's a way to have money and to spend money without being authorized or declined by your bank or your governments, and it works. But I do know more than a little bit about that, actually, so I can give people links to how to learn more on that too. Well, thanks for even bringing that up. It is,
Yeah.
as long as you've known me, that is my newer, I won't say calling or passion, but similar to that. I put a lot of research into whether or not this is a good thing or a bad thing. Don't think it's the mark of the beast.
Yeah, probably not. All right, guys, thank you so much. And if you guys are interested and you're watching this, or you're watching it live, or you're watching it a little later on, Strange Realities Conference, you can see this. You can see the little ticker on the bottom, strangerealitiesconference.com. Guy and Reverend Carter are going to be part of that on September 25th through the 27th. You can sign up. Again, we are streaming from a secret Facebook group, so you will need a Facebook account to get on. And we will be back soon, later on tonight at 7:30 Eastern Time with Tony Kail and Jack Montgomery, and then later on with Dr. Future, Recluse, and Ren Collier. And David Metcalfe will also be joining us for those as well. So come join us, and we will be back soon. Thank you so much, Guy.
Right.
Yeah, great group. How many speakers total you got that weekend?
21.
Wow, good job.
It's gonna be something. So come join us, guys.
Yeah, thanks for having me back, brother.
Thank you. Typical thing about how we're live yet again. Welcome back to the epic, very epic part 3 of the Strange Realities preview. I think this is part 3 of part 3. 3 of 3. I'm sure that's a good magical number somewhere. And so we're excited to have two gentlemen along with us, and someone that was along with us a couple of weeks ago, David Metcalfe, is joining us on these just to kind of sit in as a co-host, sort of. And what's up, David?
How's it going, everybody?
Going well. Going well. So we've got two gentlemen that are going to be speaking on Saturday, the 26th of September at the Strange Realities Conference, and that's Tony Kail.
Hello.
And Jack Montgomery.
Howdy.
And I'm real excited to have you guys come speak. Couple like last year, so how I met Jack, I was at the Aroma Gregory store. I'll give them a plug up there in Nashville.
Great.
And yeah, it's a great place.
It is.
And I went there just to pass out flyers to try to get people interested in coming to the Strange Realities Conference 2019. I don't think I got a single person, but I was able to find somebody that would come speak at the 2020 Strange Realities Conference, and that's Jack Montgomery. And I met you there, and probably bothered you a lot at the conference, and told you all about what I had going on. And it's come to find out that you wrote this excellent book called American Shamans that I cannot say enough good about. And before that, David here when we were hanging out at Paramania, told me about Tony Kail. And Tony is also kind of local. He's a Tennessean, local to our area. Jack is up there in Kentucky, not too far from Nashville. So we're all pretty localized here in the South, because David, you're in Georgia. Mm-hmm. But Tony wrote this excellent book about Memphis Hoodoo and several others.
Two excellent books.
Yeah. And we had Tony on and Jack on pretty close to each other earlier this year. So guys, welcome back to Conspirinormal. Welcome to the Strange Realities preview. So let's just kind of get into it. The way I want to do this, we'll just talk about kind of what you guys are going to talk about, give kind of like a teaser, because you guys are really doing one presentation that is going to be split into two parts. So whoever wants to take it, we'll talk about this presentation a little bit.
Well, Jack, if you want me to lead off there, and I will hand off accordingly.
That's fine.
As we go.
That's fine.
Jack and I are going to share a bit about folk practitioners and the paranormal. Here in 2020, everyone's familiar with the paranormal. We've all seen ghost chasers. We've all seen spirit mediums on TV and in real life. But, centuries before there were ghost chasers facing down apparitions, we had curanderos in Mexico interacting with these spiritual beings. And, years before, you would see a spirit medium on a TV show using a Ouija board to speak to the dead. We had conjurers in the Mid-South who would frequently speak to the dead and interact with the ancestors. And so what we want to do is sort of bring attention to, there are a number of customs and traditions that are typically known as folk traditions and practitioners of folk magic who have actually dealt with these paranormal phenomena over the years. And when we talk about the paranormal, most of us think of ghosts and hauntings and angels and demons and things like this. And we know that folk traditions around the world have dealt with these entities and dealt with these types of incidents through the years, even to the point where some of them actually encompass worldviews about mysterious beings that we typically call cryptids. So we see a lot of those in the Mid-South. I know that Jack has some information that we're going to talk a little bit about some of the different, mysterious beings that are encountered among different African, Latin, some of the Pennsylvania Dutch traditions. And Jack, isn't it some of the stuff related to you were sharing earlier today about the buhag?
Yes, the buhag is an African tradition. I just discovered the other night that it moved from West Africa first to the Caribbean. And so we have the tradition of an entity that literally is a form of vampire. And in West Africa, they literally suck the blood, and they come in the night. By the time it gets through the Caribbean and to the coast of America, it's now sucking energy. It's now sucking the life from you. So that's a very interesting tradition to look at, first of all, as a experience that people have, but it's also a tradition that's has ancient roots. And in fact, there are others. I've been opening up ideas and research. In all societies have this idea of a being that comes and steals your life from you in the night. And that's what a buhag is. Not a vampire in the sense of the Bela Lugosi and all of that, but a vampire nonetheless. More associated in this case with witchcraft.
I think there's one that I think in like the Singapore or somewhere around there. There's this one that like is a woman, but it like she unattaches herself from her body, and she's this big floating head with a spine, and she like trailing behind her, like it's really nasty. And
that's
like she steals like children in the middle of the night. Yeah.
I think it must be a similar tradition almost worldwide, because that's exactly what the buhag steps out of her skin and literally is raw meat and bones moving around. Now, it's also been tied in a modern sense. Modern explanations for it have targeted things like sleep paralysis and sleep apnea. But there's enough of the experiences, and I just was writing down one of my informants' reactions to one of these the other night in the book about the buhag, and it was there were two incidents. One was a one-time affair to a teenage boy. The second, who had just laid down on a couch. The second was a 3-week traumatic event to a 50-year-old man who never recovered from it. He still feared the night. He slept with his lights on. But then it went away. So that really doesn't deal with it in the way that you do with a medical condition. Now, I don't doubt that there's some elements in some people that experience it as that were sleep paralysis and sleep apnea. There is an element there. There's an element in most of these kind of supernatural things that people can latch onto and say, this sounds like that. And they're probably partially right. But if you have any of you ever been down around Charleston, Beaufort, in that area?
Yeah, I've been to Charleston.
Savannah.
Yeah.
The area has its own reality. It really does. It has its own atmosphere and its own reality. And you get back in those swamps and marshes, and it's a whole nother world. It's a whole nother world.
Yeah, I learned that. I live a little bit outside of Athens.
Okay. Yeah.
And it's rural enough to have that same kind of vibe where, you're in Athens and it's fairly citified, and then you get out to where I'm at and things change a little bit. So
part of my fascination with all of this is how you can have people living 20, 30 miles apart who see reality in a very different way. And how people view reality is how I got first interested in this while I was a student at University of South Carolina in the mid-1970s, which seems so long ago right now. but Tony, I didn't mean to steal your.
No.
You have to.
That parallels a lot of what we're talking about. When you say people just 20 or 30 miles out, when we talk about folk traditions and we talk about the use of the word folk. Traditionally that used to mean peasants in Europe, and the poor folk. In this scope, we're looking at more like people like you and I, just people. And some have even talked about folk religion as being more of a practical approach to life than a philosophical approach. And when we deal with folk magic, seeing it being a lot more practical than philosophical. And so there is sort of that contrast. But, as Jack was saying, with those different interpretations, so what happens when you have someone who has encountered the Buhag, or what happens when you have someone who's encountered, like in the Mississippi Delta, the concept of the Platte Eye? And, what goes on then? Well, then many cases you seek out folk practitioners who have the tools, who have the materials and the knowledge of the tradition and how to counteract whatever has happened to you, if they need to create some sort of material to give you for protection. And so this is sort of what Jack and I are looking at how have these folk traditions traditionally dealt with the supernatural, or as we call it today, the paranormal.
Mm-hmm.
And it's fascinating to see because while there are many different elements, different materials that are being used, different names for particular customs and rituals, when you look at it as a whole, you do see a lot of holdovers.
Yeah.
And you might see a cleansing in Texas being done by a curandera, and a very similar but very different type of cleansing in Mississippi with a root worker.
Mm-hmm.
But you can see some common elements there. And I find that really fascinating about that.
There actually is a universality to the things that are done. Tradition after tradition, they do the same. As Tony says, they do the same things. They interact with spirits. And for instance, there are 3 levels of worker, of practitioner. There's a simple granny who can take the burn off your finger. There's the person who can try to treat more complex diseases. And then you have the person who steps beyond that. And that's the person who engages the spirits. And they're in a different class. They also walk a very thin social line because what they do can turn on them socially. One day they're the hero and the next day they're the scapegoat if something really bad happens in the community. There's a case of that in Lexington, South Carolina, historically, with a woman whose house I've actually been in. She was at one time a very respected older lady who was a healer. Something went wrong. She became a scapegoat and ended up tortured. And this was in 1796. And in the transcript, which is a fascinating read, people were saying that, she has bewitched these people, and they rose up and clung to the ceiling. It's one of those documents you keep reading and just going, wow, this is awesome. But she was tortured and left on the road essentially to either get home or not get home. So it's an interesting thing when you start to deal with the people, these practitioners, these community healers, these communities, spiritual leaders, because they always walk this thin social line with the church and with just the people around them. They inspired both respect and fear. Lee Gandy was certainly one of the people that I learned from, and there was no neutral ground in what people thought of him. I actually think he kind of enjoyed it sometimes.
So that was a little earlier this year when we talked about him and we had you on the show, Jack. But for people that people that are watching or people that are going to watch this fairly soon, can you talk a little bit about him? Because he was like pretty much. You were kind of like. Would you consider yourself an apprentice to him at that point? in time, or had you?
Yeah, this was 1974 when I first met him. And I was a student at USC. I was driving down to the Low Country, which was exhausting because I lived in Columbia. And I heard about this fellow. And somebody said, you know, when you start opening the doors one way or the other, it comes through. And the leads come in. And this fellow came up to me and said, "You read this article in Sandleper?" And I opened it up and I thought, "Oh, this guy's just like 15 miles away." So I called him and had an interview with him. And he was what's called a Hexenmeister, which followed the powwow tradition that you see among German Americans.
Mm-hmm.
But he was far more than that. He was a mystic. And when you were at his house, just about anything could happen. And it took a lot of time for me as this little logical psychology major. You know, I had to really essentially wrap my head around his world, his view of reality, because it started to happen. Mm-hmm. And he was purposely opening that door. There was another student who is a dear friend of mine who was a very gifted healer even at that time and remains so today. But Lee practiced in his community. He was, like I say, there was sort of a no neutral ground for him socially. He'd also come out as a gay man, and that you just didn't do in rural South Carolina. That was not it. So he not only had that against him, but he was also reputed to have caused some negative events, which even in one case led to the death of a young boy. No powwow is supposed to lose their temper, and he lost his temper one time. So it became the one thing, and I know Tony will reflect back on this too, is the way that some of this is approached now is from a very lighthearted, very commercial, very sort of out there, let's have some fun with these ghosts. In traditional America, this was a deadly, serious business.
Yeah, that's a very good point.
Your life, your well-being, everything depended on you being able to produce what you said you could do. Wouldn't you say that's true, Tony?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, you know, word of mouth was definitely the best thing to bring in business to healers. And that word of mouth could change as well. You know, if you did a bad job, if you were corrupt, if you just stole money, that word could get around as well. And I'd like to echo what Jack said about a lot of things being taken lighthearted. I always get a cringe when I watch certain television shows and they'll go somewhere where there's definitely historically been a track of bad energy, reported from a number of different sources. And then someone goes in and just starts screaming, you know, "Come at me," or, you know, "We make yourself known." And obviously a lot of that comes from people who've never encountered things, because and let me put it this way: you don't demand that a rabid dog come running at you if you've ever been bit by a rabid dog.
Mm-hmm.
And so there is sort of this poppiness. One of the things too that we've seen is a lot of the folk practitioners. There's a major controversy you'll find among a number of different magico-religious traditions, where some people say that, you know, because you didn't come from this specific line of healers, you're not valid, or because you weren't taught by this specific person, you're not valid. When we look at the folk traditions, the real bona fide traditions, these were practiced out of survival. Mm-hmm. These were practiced to maintain your family, your community. These weren't done for pop magic. These weren't done for tricks.
Right.
And so there's a very big difference in between those who might take pop elements from these different traditions and sort of roll their own, versus someone who this has just been part of their life, their whole life. You know, Jack and I have talked many times about when it relates to something like hoodoo or root work. The majority of people we've known throughout the years that are traditional practitioners don't call it hoodoo. This is what I've done since I was a child. This is what my grandmother taught me to do in order to survive. They don't necessarily place a name that Western culture is familiar with, on, you know. So,
and they're, to them, the supernatural, what we call paranormal, was intricately woven into their lives on a daily basis. I came from a very staunch United Methodist, good folks, good, solid, down the line folks. However, there was this little element underneath it all. And I remember one time as a small child, I caught a glimpse of a relative who just passed, and I ran to my mother and reported it. And she looked down at me and kind of scowled and said, "Why are you afraid? You know, she loved you in life. She's not going to hurt you now. You ought to go tell her you love her." And you know, at that point, it all kind of melted away. In many Irish homes, if you don't have a spirit there, something's wrong in that house. And I know that's you didn't treat this. You didn't have, first of all, you didn't have the commercialization of the paranormal, which we do have now. But you just treated it as a normal part of life. If grandma was seen walking around the house after she was put in the graveyard, that's nice. She's your grandma. Don't worry about it. And Tony's right. I sometimes just kind of yawn at these folks who say, "Oh, only this group, and anybody who hasn't done this is only the ones capable of interpreting this." Tell you something else. All these traditions were practiced by people of all races and all creeds. Most of them we would say were Christians, but certainly down in the hoodoo part of South Carolina, they didn't care whether the person treating you for bleeding or a burn or something like that was black or white. You didn't care. Could they do it? That's what mattered. Could they get that booger out of your house? That's what mattered. And you know, I sometimes when I hate to say this because I work in academia, but sometimes when scholars get a hold of stuff, it all becomes their property, and their interpretation is, by, of course, the only one who's valid. Our ancestors nursed no such feelings. If a root doctor saw something, I'll tell you this, I went into a root doctor's house outside Beaufort after Mr. McTeer had called and got my formal introduction. And there on his wall was a tree of life, which reflected the Kabbalah. And he was a nice gentleman. He was very helpful. He was kind. We had a wonderful conversation. And finally I said, "Well, how about that over there? What is that?" He says, "I don't know." He said, "I kind of like it, don't you? I got it in a pack of stuff I ordered from New York." And I go, "Okay." So they just took what they wanted, what they needed. Yeah. None of that. I remember with Mr. McTeer, and I'm talking about James E. McTeer of Beaufort, South Carolina, who was a root doctor. We went back to his altar room, which was back behind his business office. He sold real estate at that time. And there was this altar room. And hopefully I'll have a picture of that with my PowerPoint. And he would treat clients there. And finally, one day I looked at the altar and I said, "Mr. McTeer, what is all this?" He looks at me and goes, "Props." He said, "All this is designed to put people in a certain mental space because they have to be outside themselves for me to be able to help them." He understood it at a very deep level. He was an amazing guy. and he did not suffer fools well.
And he was a sheriff there, wasn't he?
He was a former sheriff, yes.
Mm-hmm.
He was in his 70s when I met him. His grip was like iron, and
Wow.
you wouldn't have wanted to cross this man. But Tony's right. Once money gets into it, once it becomes really money, the whole thing goes out the door. But the real people remain.
Mm-hmm.
And we've gone through, believe it or not, we've gone through several occult phases. Back in Columbia, South Carolina at USC, it was in 70s, it was a hip thing to be a kahuna.
Oh yeah.
And so there were little kahunas running all over the campus.
And that came through Borderland Science Research Group out of LA. Yeah, they published it was some guy that was out in Hawaii, and he was publishing the kahuna magic. And it's interesting because it didn't end well for him. So people who brought that tradition, into the pop culture, and that they didn't end well. So that's still a subject of conversation with folks that were involved in that publishing.
Well, you said something interesting, Jack. Well, it was all interesting, but you said something that caught my attention about calling spirits boogers. And you guys especially are talking about, like, you're kind of like tying in with this presentation. I believe you're going to tie in some of the stuff about cryptids too. And I know that, like, in Mississippi and Alabama and those areas, these guys that are like these serious Bigfoot hunters now, they call them boogers.
Yeah.
So I wonder if there's some kind of correlation there.
Probably linguistically, it relates that way. It's a booger is something that's out there and it's scary.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Would you say that's true, Tony?
Yeah. It's and what's amazing is a lot of these we refer to them as magical beasts. They have a lot of commonalities geographically. We're used to we hear stories about some of the fairy folk that are kind of chaotic in Appalachia, in Mexico, in a lot of Latin American countries. The concept of the duende, it's like a little dwarf, is really popular. And I have a friend from Panama, and she says as a child they would tell them, if you hear whistling in the woods, don't go into the woods because the duende is stealing children. And we see what's I find fascinating is that we see images of the duende show up in shrines to even some of David, I know you probably can echo this, some of the narco stuff out of Mexico where they're appropriating different religious cultures as forms of protection. And we've got I remember seeing a crime scene photos from a scene where I had images of the duende set up in his shrine. It's part of his spiritual works.
There's actually a prayer to Don Diego Duende in one of the Santa Muerta grimoires.
Wow.
Yeah, and that caught me because I was looking through it and I was like, wait, prayer to the elf? Like, what is that? And it's interesting because the prayer itself is to the King of Kings as Don Diego Duende, but in the sense of nature, right? So this thing that is literally the spirit of the forest. So it's this sense of great power. And the line that really I love the line. It's it's basically like cowards tremble, I walk with the elf, is the translation of it. And it's this sense of the duende, which once you get into the representations in the altars and stuff, it's like a pop culture picture of a dwarf or something. But sense of what it actually is this entity that's basically the lord or the patroness or the patron of the forest, that is the spirit of nature. And that's all throughout South America. They have this tradition of this You go into the forest and you can be misled and you don't come back. You end up.
It all is mindful to me of one of the great Africanists, John Mbiti, talked about in one of his books about how in the African landscape you're going to always find these land spirits that inhabit the rivers and the mountains and the forests, and we can see that from sub-Saharan Africa to central Mexico to the Mississippi Delta. These different land spirits, and in some cases they are believed to work with human beings, and in other cases to be the enemy of mankind.
Either way, you have to treat them with respect.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah. There's when I met Dennis William Houck, who was the international president of the Alchemy Guild. He had learned alchemy when he was in, I believe he was in Prague, or he was in, it was maybe Prague, maybe Germany, but he was in that area. I think it was Germany, because he went into the Black Forest to get his dirt. But he was there studying mathematics, and he went down to at the university he was at, he went down to the archives and he saw these alchemical books, and he became fascinated by it. He started looking into it, and when he was in Europe, he was able to actually meet folks who carried on a lineage of alchemical practice that went back at least to the 1700s. Wow. So when he got taken out to, he met these people and they were showing him the practice. They went out to places where they found large earthworms. And the thing was that there was where the genius loci, the spirit of the place, was potent enough to get the dirt that they needed for their working. Wow. And so there's this sense that, even stretches to stuff like Hermeticism and, alchemy in that, where those place spirits and that spirit of place is super important, and it's important to respect that, because it's, in the alchemical tradition, that's the prima materia that he was looking for, right? So it's literally the thing that makes reality. It's that finding thing, so those place spirits are incredibly important. And that's the kind of cross-cultural thing you guys are describing. It stretches into Europe and it stretches into, Russia, and you see it in Southeast Asian practices. And that I've been looking at a lot at some of the folk necromantic traditions in Southeast Asia, and it's amazing the crossovers for some of the stuff that they're doing when you look at conjure. And you look at conjure practices that deal with spirits and deal with working with the dead. It's a lot of carryover. So,
since me and Adam have been looking into this stuff and reading your guys' book, and I think just the most striking misconception that you guys really help shatter and spreading folk magic does is that we think in the popular conception of here's Christianity, here's magic or the occult. But you guys point out how much of alongside and within Christianity, all these traditions have existed, and that's something that really is a big shift that people really don't understand, that you can understand by reading the old stuff.
Well, when a minister raises his hands in invocation, he's practicing magic. I don't care what you say; that's how you practice magic. When he lays hands upon people, that's practicing magic. Those traditions and those little rituals have survived from ancient times. And they're even in biblical texts. It's I know the powwows draw this whole biblical analogy, and I forgot the verse, where it is. That says, "If I can do this, so can you. If God can heal, then you can too." And so that's where they take their legitimacy for being able to channel that divine energy through themselves to a target in need of healing. And, one of the things that initially caught my eye and made me realize there was something more going on than just an anthropological study was seeing that it worked on small children and animals. Because I'd always thought, well, you have to believe this stuff. You got to believe this stuff to make it work. Nope, you don't. The animal has no ability to believe. Neither does a small baby that has the thrush in their mouth. But still, it works.
It's outside the power of belief.
Something else is going on, and that's when I finally realized there's something really important here, and I cannot. I'm never going to find it out if I don't step off and dive into this reality. I'm never going to see it, because that's what, and you give up a certain level of group acceptance when you do that. It's called going native. But you start to understand at a very different level when you do that. There is no, and there again, like anything that matters in life, there's no neutral ground. You're either in or you're not. Can't sit on the fence.
And to what you're saying too, when I moved to the South from Chicago, getting to know people, like that, as you guys have pointed out, this stuff is not, when you're living in the South and when you're living in cultures that have these traditions, this stuff isn't like, this strange kind of like pop culture, people are wearing t-shirts and like waving a flag and that. You're just out having conversations and folks are telling you about their uncle or their aunt or their grandmother or they themselves. And, and it comes up when it's needed.
Yes.
And it really does have that sense of, like you said, it works on kids, it works on animals. And it's always the same. Everyone you talk to, when they actually touch the traditions, they have the same experiences, and so you start to see this happen. It's this thing, it's a living thing that you're encountering. It's not this, it's not in a book and it's not on TV, it's not made up, it's folks actually, sharing their experiences where they were healed. You can see the healing happening, and it is really a complete change in paradigm,
But to the point that we were making about the amalgamation of Christianity and to folk magic. I mean, even in powwow tradition, Jack. I mean, like it's the books and texts are even like couched in biblical terms. So I mean, like even a phrase like "long lost friend," you can kind of say that that's kind of a biblical. Like it's almost like a biblical term in and of itself, but then something as obvious as like, what is it, the sixth book of Moses?
Yeah, sixth, seventh book of Moses.
Yeah, sixth and seventh book of Moses. So like, like saying that they are actually adding books to the Pentateuch, essentially. That's how important they see it. And then Tony, in the hoodoo tradition, I mean, in your book about Memphis hoodoo and the hoodoo in the Mid-South, I mean, there's all kinds of ministers that were African-American ministers but they also practice hoodoo as well. So it's like, it's just it's not, there's no, like the line is very, very fine between all this material.
Yeah. It's, it becomes tempting, especially when we talk about African-American based hoodoo, to talk of during that time in history on slave plantations where Africans were forced to practice Christian practices. It's tempting to immediately jump to, they were incorporated or their syncretism took place basically because they wanted to hide practices. Well, that did happen, but there was also an element that I really got firsthand when I was in East Africa years ago, and we entered this lady's hut, and on her wall she had an image of Jesus, and then she also had a number of instruments used in a local African traditional religion. And I was speaking through my translator to her, and I basically tried to ask, I see you have a combination of two different elements, and essentially her answer was whatever works. And so we see this among a lot of the traditions, that it's not always because like in traditions like Regla de Ocha and Santeria, where Catholicism may be used as a costume for survival during those periods of colonialism, but that also there may be elements that may be incorporated into these traditions. And so there may not be that line of, oh yeah, we threw in some Christianity with this. No, this may be a strain of Christianity or a strain of folk tradition that happens to have elements of Christianity.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And then like Jack, you in your book, you talk about too how there's this syncretism of those traditions between African Americans and European descended people, between their different folk magics. They also cross-pollinate.
Of course they did, yeah. Like I say, whatever took care of the problem. And I think David made the idea that it was a seamless transition. You didn't worry that this ritual came from the old African American gentleman down the street. You didn't worry about that. It took the burn away. It made your wart fall off. Yeah, who cares? You know, this is I think if you allow it is where folk tradition is a universal kind of experience throughout the world. And I think David talked about that in Southeast Asia. I would think if you got around a shaman in that part of the world, if you stayed around them long enough and they were willing to open up to you, you would see some of the same kinds of things.
Mm-hmm.
You would see the same kinds of rituals, and especially with the paranormal.
Mm-hmm.
You know, these were not only the root doctor, the powwow, all these people were interpreters. And so they're falling right into the whole idea of the old shaman. And that's why I use the term shaman. Weren't saying that these people were shamans in the academic definition of the word, but they acted in many ways, in shamanic ways. They went into trance. Like when Lee would go hunt somebody who was missing, he went into deep trance, and you sat with him because you had to protect him. Because he was vulnerable to spirit attack in that trance. And there were things you were to do if he started to show distress. So, but I imagine that spirit traveling by shamans, that was as shamanic as it comes.
So we have sorry, go ahead, Jack.
He would usually find the person. Sometimes they weren't in the places that made their relatives happy.
It's analogous to like an OB, an out of body experience, essentially.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Well, that was something I found interesting about McTeer. And I know you want to get to the question, but I just wanted to bring this up because you actually knew McTeer. He in his books talks about J.B. Rhine's work.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and so he was very familiar with what was going on in parapsychology at the time.
It was.
And I found that it was amazing to see that, because it wasn't, you know, again, with the naturalness of this stuff, he's just in this element. He has these experiences and he's like, oh, what other experts are there out there? He's talking about psychologists that are working, you know, in clinical studies, and he's talking about J.B. Rhine and his, you know, the parapsychology stuff that was happening at the Rhine Institute, and he was fully versed in all of it, you know.
He was,
because it worked, you know, and he was exploring this experience that he was having and this knowledge that he had to access these states, you know.
It was interesting. Both he and Lee Gandy, in a different tradition, were a little bit atypical,
mm-hmm.
and that's that they were both highly educated men. Lee had been a university professor at one time at Lenore Ryan College and a history teacher in high school. Most of your rural root doctors and powwows
mm-hmm.
probably didn't have a lot of academic education. They could read, they could write. Generally, that was a universal, but beyond that, they were not at the level of these two gentlemen.
Did they feel like they had to unlearn things?
No, because they were raised in it.
Okay.
It came natural as breathing. McTeer once said that he learned his from African Americans on the place where he grew up, on the property where he grew up. There probably are still some of those old fellas down there. And they were ladies too. That's another thing. Gender didn't have a thing to do with it. I know Tony talks about this wonderful lady, Miss Jessie. I still laugh every time I think about her cure for constipation. You know remember what I'm talking about?
Well, let's hear it.
Yeah. Miss Jessie was a root worker from rural West Tennessee, and just an amazing woman. But she she advised me one day of the naturalness of one of her remedies, and that is that someone came to her that was constipated, and she advised that they take some poke root, some turpentine, and I believe some tobacco.
Snuff.
And snuff. Yeah, and take it and mix it and manually place it in a certain region of the body. And she advised me soon after that, in her words, they were going all over my yard. Again, very natural, not picking up a lot of pop artifacts from Hot Topic or a lot of materials like that.
So we do have a question here from Aaron O'Brien, who we were just on his show the other night, the Synthaholics podcast, talking about Star Trek and Dune. He's asking, seeing the cultural impact of magic occult, do you guys see things all the time and know that meaning or origins and know their meaning or origins and think this is from such and such, and then think there is too much to explain to a friend or family member with you at that time?
Oh, I don't deal with it in family. My wife knows about it, but I wouldn't bring this up for love nor money. I'll share one little story. I promise it won't take long. Thanksgiving 1975. I was fully immersed in Lee Gandy's tutelage, and I went to Thanksgiving dinner, and some person asked me what I was doing, and I spilled the beans, and they all started to laugh and make fun. And I looked over at my little German grandmother, who was busy eating, didn't even look up, and I looked at her and I said, "Do you know what I mean, grandmother?" She looks up at me and goes, and went right back in. And I didn't hear a thing else. I thought, holy crap. She knows what I'm talking about. Well, I went over, I always did her yard, took care of her yard. So I went over there and did the yard, and we sat down for our pie and coffee. And I said, "You winked at me over that." She says, "Yes." She said, my father, your great grandfather was a powwow in Western North Carolina. He couldn't do anything for humans, but he was renowned for being able to heal animals. And I said, "I've never heard of this." She said, "You had no need to know."
Wow.
And but there it was in the family. And I had never heard of it before that moment. I think when you start to open the doors, if you're honest with yourself, if you're authentic with yourself, the doors of all kinds of things will open up to you. It's like the world falls into line, and all of a sudden you hear from the people you need to hear from. You start to encounter people, and you know you're not encountering them for as a happen chance. Would you say that's true, both David and Tony? If something changes in the course of your life, and you all of a sudden, the people that you I met a lady last night. I gave a talk through Zoom in Australia. These awfully nice people contacted me, and I was talking last night with this lady who's one of the elders And my God, this person knew everybody, down from Dr. Santee to, she knew all the great occultists. She had a 50,000 volume occult library. And I thought, there's no accident that I just met this woman and we're having this conversation. So the whole idea that synchronicities, yeah, it's just part of that flow that you get into. I mean, if you've got a different experience, please, but I think I see David nodding, I think Tony would agree. There's just something takes place in your life and things start to change, but you've got to be brutally honest with yourself and what you're trying to achieve.
Yeah, I mean, well, and I walked out the back of when I moved down here and stayed. I walked out my back door into the alley and I met a fellow named Preston, whose father was a traditional healer. And
where is this, David?
This was in Monroe, Georgia.
Okay.
Father was a healer outside of in kind of like the Atlanta area, but in the 60s and 50s. And I was out walking to my car and he's walking. He was a cook at the restaurant. And we started talking and, he asked me what I did and I had just moved from Chicago and I was like, I don't know if I want to tell anyone what I write about. I don't want to discuss this in the South. Like, cause my brother's was a minister for a while. My other brother lived with Mennonite in the Mennonite community. So I was used to just not, just don't bring it up. And so I told him I wrote about weird things, and I kind of gave him the soft sell, like, oh, well, like the shows about ghost hunting and stuff like that, like really just underplaying all of it. And he looked at me and he goes, well, a lot of people say they don't believe in this, but I believe in God. I can't see God. So if I don't believe in this, then, I don't believe in God. And I was like, oh, okay. So we started talking about ghosts, and then he starts telling me about his dad. And, it was an amazing, life-changing experience for me to hear this. It was just this opening experience. I mean, I've had experiences since I was a kid, but it's just those people, and that's kind of the being aware of it. It's, you may know something, maybe kind of tucked in the back of your head, but these people that you encounter in this, they open it up more, and it's the continuing of different stuff. I mean, with both of Jack, your book and your relationship with Sheriff McTeer and Tony, I encountered Tony's work in America stuff. It was the Santa Muerta book that you had put out, which was one of the only books outside of Andrew Chestnut's books that was out there, and then being able to, to communicate and to kind of share information in that, it's been amazing. And I think that, this kind of thing, I think is an example of that. Just these, different paths kind of opening up to that.
Let's talk. Oh, go ahead, Jack.
No, go ahead. I'm done.
Well, I was just going to say, let's talk a little bit before, because of the time that we got left, just about each part of your presentation, how you guys have kind of divvied this up. And so who's doing part one? I think, is that you, Tony? I think.
Tony.
Yeah.
We're gonna open up looking at different folk traditions. We're gonna look at different traditions and how they encounter the paranormal. We'll look at. I'm gonna take a look at African American hoodoo. Also, primarily Mexican curanderismo. And then some of the Afro-Cuban traditions, and then we will pass it over to Jack. And Jack, you have your share of.
I'm going to touch on hoodoo because Tony does Mid-South, and I sort of do the East Coast, the whole coastal area of South Carolina, the hoodoo that's practiced there. And I'm going to probably touch on a little bit with the powwow, but I'm going to be primarily focused on the Southeastern expressions found in hoodoo, because they are very rich in supernatural elements. That's where you get your plat eyes and your boo hags and all the different kind of entities that live out there in those marshes, and amongst that Spanish moss.
Oh yeah,
you probably have plenty of that in Georgia too.
Oh yeah. But a property that I just lived at, it was 200 years old, and the guy had a place out on the coast, and he would bring the moss back to hang in his trees. So we had imported Spanish moss.
My mother used to do that stuff. We'd have that stuff hanging in the trees. Spanish moss on pine trees. Now, come on.
That's they get bugs in them too. So like, you walk underneath it and you get like chiggers and stuff, and it's like nobody brings this stuff to you. Like, keep it where it belongs.
David, was there any question that you might have for these gentlemen?
I don't know. I thank you for bringing me in on this and being able to join the conversation. I love both of their works. I hope that everybody who's listening to this and everybody who sees the things, that they have a chance to get your books, because it's amazing what you guys have done to bring forward the actual traditions, to have the conversations, to bring this stuff out into a time period now where, as you both pointed out, it's so commercialized, and there's a layer of falsity to it that folks don't always get to that root of what people are actually doing, and what these practices that these people don't publish themselves. They're not necessarily out there. They're just living their lives in a community, and they're providing a community service. And you guys have gone out and sought this out, and I'm so thankful for that, and thankful that you guys have had the opportunity to write your books, and
thank you,
to do things like this.
I tell you this, Tony had an insight the other night that just it's one of those things like, yeah, that's right. And that's that. Most of our conceptions of the paranormal that we are working with today in the greater society are rooted in the perceptions that were part of American folk tradition. The whole concepts of ghosts and how they interact with this dimension. Tony could probably say it better.
Well, and Jack pretty much nailed it on that. That's when we look at what we consider paranormal activity today, and kind of go into our whole thesis of this program, we can find many different cultural observations through the years among folk cultures in recognizing spirits and ghosts, and recognizing hauntings, and recognizing these magical beasts. And so when we draw it back, we see that they do come from authentic traditions, but we sort of see it through our Western popular culture lens now. And so it's fascinating to see, a wood cutting featuring someone dealing with a spirit, and contrast that with watching a TV show where someone is called in to do some sort of deliverance from a spirit or something of that nature.
Absolutely. I'm really looking forward to these presentations. This is going to be really fascinating, and it really brings something to the just spread of other ideas that we're exploring at the conference. I think it really adds something. I really want to thank you guys.
It really looks like a first-rate conference all the way down the line, and I applaud you for the work you've done.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. We've been putting the time in on it for sure. Just real quick, so the time that you guys are speaking is on Saturday. And actually, all three of you gentlemen are speaking on Saturday. Tony, you are at 5:20 to 6:20. That's Eastern time, so 4:20 to 5:20 Central. Because I know you Surfiel and Jack are all on Central, and Jack, you are 6:30 to 7:30 Eastern time, so 5:30 to 6:30 Central. So that's what we have. We have you guys back to back. And David is 1:25 to 2:25 Eastern time, and he's on Eastern time, so I don't need to make the conversion for him. But
well, wait a minute, I'm 6:30 to 7:30 on Central Time?
It's 6:30 to 7:30 Eastern, so it'll be 5:30 to 6:30 Central.
Okay, got it.
Yeah, we're just setting everything to Eastern Time because we've got people watching this from all over the world, pretty much. So, just kind of like trying to tailor it to the East Coast time. But gentlemen, please tell us where people can contact you, where they can find your books, all that good stuff before we end this section.
Tony, you want to go first?
You can find me on Twitter at Memphis Hoodoo, and on Facebook at Memphis Hoodoo as well. And my books are available through History Press and through Amazon and most major book outlets.
Okay.
As for me, you can find American Shamans, Journeys with Traditional Healers. It's all over the place. There are a lot of people have copies of it. I even have some myself that I'll sell to you direct and autograph it for you. My publisher went out of business, so I grabbed the last of the stock, and I have about 40 left of that book. But Tony and I are working on a new book that it'll be reflected in what we talk about at this conference. But we're working on a book for Llewellyn. Manuscript is due in December, and we'll see how far we get with that.
And David, go ahead and plug your stuff.
davidmetcalfe.wordpress.com is my blog, and David B. Metcalfe on Twitter. I'm kind of all over the place, so I haven't plugged my music. You can go to the-message.bandcamp.com for my ambient works if you're so inclined.
Where can I listen to your music? Bandcamp?
Yeah, I'll send you a link, Jack, so you can.
Okay, that's cool.
I'll also send you. I'll send you the Tony. I don't know. Have you read the Preston conversation?
No.
Okay, I'll send that to you guys.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, gentlemen, thank you so much. Stay with us, though. I'm just going to end the stream. And we will be back with Dr. Future, Recluse, Ren Collier, and David is going to stay with us. And we'll be back, guys, in just about less than probably 30 minutes. See you then.
Thank you.